Almost every single year, a running back explodes onto the scene and blows up everything we thought we knew about that player. Like in 2021 with James Conner in Arizona. Or in 2020, James Robinson comes out of nowhere to finish as the RB7 with Jacksonville. And the year before that, Austin Eckler dominated to an RB4 finish. And back to 2017, Alvin Kamara. Or 2015, when Devonta Freeman finished as the RB1 despite being drafted as the RB40 in the majority of drafts. And 2022, it was Josh Jacobs. RB3 finish in PPR, RB1 in standard formats as the 23rd running back off the board in the 5th round. He finished number 1 in rushing yards with 1,653 of them, 2nd in attempts and 4th in touchdowns. And Jacobs did all of this without a single receiving score, but he did post top 10 reception and receiving yard numbers at his position. And he was on the field for 75% of the Raiders' offensive snaps. So how the hell did this happen with a guy who received a significant amount of snaps in a totally meaningless Hall of Fame game before the season even began, and was essentially viewed as an RB dead zone draft pick, likely to be bogged down in a backfield committee under new head coach Josh McDaniels? Well, in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see how everything went right for the 4th year back in Las Vegas. Jacobs had no actual competition for touches in the backfield unless 4th round rookie Zamir White happened to turn heads out of the gate. And the Raiders offensive line went from 29th in run blocking in 2021 to 17th in 2022. But the pedigree was already there with Jacobs, and he went on to lead the league in missed tackles forced with 90 and was 2nd behind only Derrick Henry in yards after contact. And it didn't hurt that Las Vegas added Devontae Adams to the roster either. There's just always so much luck involved in this stuff, though. We didn't actually know how McDaniels was going to run the offense or how the line would hold up or if Jacobs was even that good. But we do know that volume, opportunity, and lack of competition at your position with enough receiving work to make a difference are the main ingredients to spark a breakout campaign like we saw from Jacobs last year. So in this video, we're going to take a look at 3 running backs outside the top 10 at their position, in the 3rd round or later, and who can massively outperform their ADP with league-winning upside. We'll save the late round dart throws for another video. We've got plenty of time. We're talking about this in June right now. And look at some guys that have real league-winning upside that can massively outperform where they're being drafted right now. So let's get into it. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and follow me at Laffy_D on Twitter. Coming in at number 3, it's Joe Mixon, currently being drafted 52nd overall on Underdog as the 16th running back off the board. Now, we got to talk about Mixon, and boy, there's a lot to talk about. No question there. He's facing charges for aggravated menacing after allegedly pointing a gun in a woman's face and telling her he should shoot her. It's not funny, but I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Who knows how this is going to play out? And we do know that last season, Alvin Kamara was mired in legal troubles from a felony battery charge that happened during the Pro Bowl weekend in 2022. But that case continued to be delayed and still ongoing, and he hasn't faced any disciplinary action from the league yet. Assuming this case with Mixon follows a similar pattern, he probably won't face a suspension, if anything, until the case is resolved. But it's not like he doesn't have any blemishes on his record, so this could play out differently. And that's not the only thing, though. The Bengals are expected to ask Mixon to take a pay cut, and he could be released if he doesn't accept it. But it's sounding more and more likely that he's going to stay in Cincy for 2023, so this is way less of a concern. But let's rewind the clock to 2022 first. It was a pretty inefficient season for Mixon outside of one insane game in Week 9 against the Panthers, where he accounted for 5 of his 9 total touchdowns on the year. He averaged only 55 rushing yards per game on 3.9 yards per attempt, and struggled to get much of anything going after contact and didn't break a ton of tackles at a rate that you'd like to see. But if that's all you're looking at, then you're entirely missing the forest for the trees. First off, the Bengals, in quotes, much improved offensive line struggled mightily early on before finding their footing last year. Now they've added Orlando Brown Jr. too, which is another huge upgrade to this unit. Second, Mixon's 29 rushing attempts inside the 10-yard line were 2nd most in football, behind only Jamal Williams. And that's without mentioning his 6 targets inside the 10, which was 3rd among all running backs. He also finished 7th in average touches per game with just over 19. And while Mixon started losing snaps and opportunities to Samaje Perine later in the season, The only running backs behind him on the depth chart now are 5th-round rookie Chase Brown and former 6th-round picks Travion Williams and Chris Evans. And despite all of this, he still finished the season as the RB11 and the RB8 in fantasy points per game. Yes, thanks in large part to an outlier game, but still, there's way too much upside in Mixon for me to pass up on drafting him in the 5th round right now. And clear top 5 potential is in play for a guy who's being taken as the RB16 on Underdog, especially when we know there's potential for him to continue to be involved in the passing game after finishing top 6 in targets at his position in 2020. If you haven't signed up on Underdog Fantasy yet, then you truly must not love fantasy football. Because while you're sitting around and researching, waiting for your drafts to commence in August and early September, we've already been drafting. They got a $15 million prize pool on their best ball contest already out and running. They got the puppy, $5 to enter, $1 million prize pool. And when you sign up, they're matching your deposit bonus up to $100 at 100%, which means you put $100 in, you got $200 now. Hell, you only put 20 in, now you got 40. If you're not drafting already, what are you doing? We're drafting all through the spring and into the summer, as many lineups as we possibly can. That's what loving fantasy football really comes down to, especially when they got contests with $3 million up top to first place this year. Best ball is the way to do it. You don't have to make roster moves. You don't have to set your lineup every week. You don't have to do any of that. You draft your best team, and there it is, the same team throughout the entirety of the season. And you can draft as many of them as you want. Over at Underdog Fantasy, we got the link in the description and in the chat. You click that, you sign up, get your deposit bonus, and start drafting in June, July, whenever it is. But don't be the guy that waits to August or September to get some lineups in. We're already in business, baby, and it's happening at Underdog Fantasy. Number 2, Najee Harris. Underdog ADP of 38, 12th running back off the board. Now, keep in mind, Underdog ADPs are certainly different. You're going to see a lot of wide receivers go first, so this could change once you get into some of your own leagues in season long. But right now, on Underdog, Najee Harris is going outside of the 3rd round, and I get it. Those of you who drafted Harris in the 1st round last year may not want to hear this, but there's a ton of upside in 2023. We're talking about a player who finished 6th among his position in total touches last year and 3rd over the second half of the season, where he finished as the RB8. Harris also saw 80% of the team's running back carries inside the 10-yard line. Yes, he was wildly inefficient, averaging only 3.8 yards per attempt and ranking 33rd in yards after contact per attempt among all running backs with at least 100 carries. But there's reason to believe this could change in 2023. The Steelers' offensive line could be a lot better from a run blocking perspective this season. They added Isaac Seumalo in free agency and drafted Broderick Jones in the 1st round of this year's draft, and he's expected to start right away. It's also very possible that despite bringing back offensive coordinator Matt Canada, and of course to the disdain of many Pittsburgh Steelers fans out there, this offense could be much better overall. Kenny Pickett's got a year under his belt at quarterback with more than enough capable pass catchers, and things can't really get much worse than they were in 2022, where Harris still finished as a top 12 running back. But Canada has also emphasized that they still plan on being a running team. The volume is there, and a better offense could promote far more scoring opportunities than in 2022. What more can we ask for than that, where Harris is being drafted? If his pass catching volume rebounds even a little closer to his rookie season, we could be seeing his best statistical campaign yet. And if it doesn't, we're still probably looking at 300 plus touches in an improved offense. It's a win-win at 38 ADP right now for Najee Harris. And finally, number 1, Breece Hall. Underdog ADP of 31, 11th running back off the board. I absolutely love this guy. And last year as a rookie, it looked like the breakout was already inevitable for Breece Hall. After splitting the backfield with Michael Carter through the first 3 weeks, although Hall was already seeing a ton of pass catching work with Joe Flacco under center and then playing behind by like 50 points, he commanded a huge workload from weeks 4 through 6 before going down with a torn ACL in week 7 against Denver, but not before ripping off a beautiful 62-yard touchdown run. Hall averaged 5.8 yards per attempt through 7 games and went for 10 plus yards on 19% of his carries. He also averaged 4.13 yards after contact per attempt. Amazing. And even though Hall was splitting work with Carter through the first 3 weeks, he was still the PPR RB6 through 7 weeks, and he only played 12 snaps in week 7. There is one thing we have to address before going any further here, though, and that is, where would Hall have been drafted if he never tore his ACL? I have little doubt that he'd be a clear first-round pick in every format, especially now that the Jets actually have a competent quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and what's expected to be an offense that actually functions as such. But right now, Hall's being drafted in the middle of the 3rd round with the injury and uncertainty surrounding his health clearly baked into his ADP. Every player responds differently to an ACL injury, whether it's the time it takes them to return to the field or how effective they are upon their return. I mean, shit, look at Adrian Peterson in 2012, MVP 2,000-yard season, and he went down in December the year before. Now, that's a complete outlier. We can't use that as, rationale to say that Breece Hall will be fine. But matter of fact, Jamal Charles in the same season, week 2 went down with an ACL, and he racked up 1,700 yards from scrimmage the very next year and didn't miss a game. But then on the other side of the coin, you have Dalvin Cook, who in week 4 of 2017 went down with the same injury. And while he returned for week 1 in 2018, he wasn't himself until later in the year. So it's a mixed bag. However, Breece Hall is 22 years old, and there's already optimism that he'll be back for week 1. There's videos of him in OTAs cutting on the field on a surgically repaired knee. And even if he isn't 100% until a few weeks into the season, Hall could be a legitimate league-winning running back in this new look offense. And sometimes you just have to take risks. And this is one I'm 100% willing to take, especially considering this year's draft is littered with high-floor running backs in the middle rounds that can take some of the pressure off drafting Hall in the 3rd. Sure, Carter's still on the roster, and the Jets spent a 5th-round draft pick on Israel Abanikanda. But if Hall is healthy, he is unquestionably, without a shadow of a doubt, the most talented running back in this backfield and possibly in the league. Appreciate you guys watching as always. The season could not get here quick enough. Remember, hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you go, and we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.